Welcome back to PatBar LSAT Prep. In this video, we begin our presentation of Section 3 of PrepTest 76. This is the analytical reasoning section of the prep test, comprising roughly 1/4 of your total score. The purpose of analytical reasoning problems is to test your ability to determine what must be, what can be, and what cannot be within a given set of circumstances. This skill will be tested constantly, both in law school and in practice. Many test takers find analytical reasoning problems to be especially difficult. If you're one of them, that's the bad news. The good news is, by learning how to diagram these problems, this may be the one area of the LSAT on which you see the most improvement. These diagramming strategies are why the problems in this section are known as logic games. The first thing you will do when reading these problems is to isolate the players within the game. They could be persons, places, events, virtually anything. Once you've isolated the players, you may be required to determine how often these players are allowed to appear within your fact set. You will be tasked with determining an order in which the players should appear, or which should be grouped together, or which match up to each other. More often than not, simple sets of lines are all you need to draw. These will be your placeholders as you determine what can go where. Once your game is diagrammed, when the correct answers to the problem do not make themselves apparent, the answers to be eliminated often do. The trick is learning to diagram as quickly as possible. If this is your problem area, we recommend not just practice, but repetition. Come back to a problematic game at a later date, keep track of your times, and be sure to start from scratch using the particulars of the problem, not your memory. Logic games are not a memory exercise, but one of proving facts. If you try to rely on memory, the LSAT will present games you've never seen before, and your score will suffer. The first problem is a straightforward linear game, determining the order in which the players appear. Remember the first task, isolate the players. We are told that a detective is trying to determine in what order a criminal recruited his 7 accomplices. The first thing we did, just to be certain of our diagram, was to skim over the questions to make sure they were specific only to the accomplices, and therefore 7 spots to fill. The second thing, make sure each of your players' names is a unique letter of the alphabet or starts with a unique letter. This is almost always the case, but if you're like us, you're allergic to surprises. In this game, we're given one anchor. Peters was the 4th person recruited, so the letter P goes in slot 4. This is the only one we can place for the moment. The remainder we must determine from the other 3 rules. First, we know that Stanton and Tou were not recruited one after the other. We know that Quinn came before Rivero and that 𝗑𝗏𝗏 was directly before White. So on now to question 1. In which order could these accomplices have been recruited? We can get C out of the way. It's the one that directly violates where we know Peters must be. It can't be B since 𝗑𝗏𝗏 then White. A is wrong because Tou directly precedes Stanton, and that violates the first rule. E too must be wrong, since Quinn before Rivero. The only response that follows all the rules we're given is D. Question 1 is among the easier problems you will find in the analytical reasoning sections of the prep tests. If you have difficulty with any question, mark it in your book and practice. Repeat as necessary. Change the order with which you revisit them, anything to jog not your memory but your deductive skills. With these strategies, you will master this section and increase your score. Question 2 is another can be, but again, only one of them can be. And again, there are those we can eliminate immediately. Peters is in the middle slot of the 7. Peters therefore would stay in the middle slot of the middle 5. Quinn can't be, and E is wrong. 𝗑𝗏𝗏 is immediately before White. Tou cannot be, and B is wrong. Is A possible? Look at Rule 2. Quinn came before Rivero. For Quinn, Stanton, Peters, 𝗬, and 𝗵𝘁 to be numbered 2 through 6, Rivero to follow Quinn somewhere would have to be number 7. Since Rule 3 means white immediately followed 𝗵𝘁, that would force white into the 7 slot, and that eliminates A. That leaves us with C and D. Notice in both cases that Stanton is the last of the middle 5, or in the 6th slot. Our first rule is Stanton and 𝗬 were not successive. That means 𝗬 must be in the 1 slot. The instant you see that, the correct answer becomes apparent. Quinn cannot follow Rivero. D would place Quinn in the 7th slot, and D is incorrect. So, if 𝗬 has to be first, and therefore Rivero has to be 7th, only 𝗵𝘁, White, Peters, Quinn, and Stanton in that order can be the middle 5. C is correct. Question 3 wants you to accept as a given that 𝗬 was recruited second. Which of the 5 possible answers could then be true? This question is easier than it looks, but it is why they still make pencils, and erasers for that matter. You must be correct, but you must be quick. So, pencil in 𝗬. We know from Rule 1 that 𝗬 and Stanton cannot be successive, so Stanton cannot be first and cannot be third. 𝗵𝘁 and White were successive, so 𝗵𝘁 cannot be first. This means we can fill in 5th, 6th, and 7th, which can only be Stanton, 𝗵𝘁, and White, or 𝗵𝘁, White, and Stanton. Now we eliminate. White can be only 6th or 7th and cannot be 3rd. E is incorrect. Quinn cannot be 3rd because that would force Rivero to be first, and that violates Rule 2. Romero cannot be 5th. Only Stanton or 𝗵𝘁 can be. B is incorrect. C cannot be, for Stanton to be 6th, splits 𝗵𝘁 and White, and violates Rule 3. As your work shows, 𝗵𝘁 can be 6th, and D is the only correct response. Question 4 requires that you assume Quinn, then Rivero. Where then can Stanton not be? There is exactly one possibility, and this one should jump out at you. Rule 3 gives us VW. If we assume QR on top of that, we have 2 pairs. Pairs can only fill 1 and 2, or 2 and 3, and 5 and 6, or 6 and 7. Slot 2, if filled by an individual not in a pair, would have to break up a pair. An individual in slot 6 would do the same. Sure enough, B would place Stanton in 2. That cannot happen, and B is the correct response. Question 5 asks you to accept that White was recruited before Rivero and Rivero before 𝗬. Notice the "and" you are to accept both. So, which of the 5 is possible? We eliminated E immediately. If 𝗵𝘁 is 6th, White is 7th per Rule 3. And if 7th, White cannot be before Rivero, never mind 𝗬. Rivero cannot be 3rd per Rule 2. If White is before Rivero and 𝗵𝘁 has to be immediately before White, the earliest Quinn could go is 5th, and Quinn must precede Rivero. Stanton cannot be 2nd, also per Rule 3. If Stanton is 2nd, the earliest White can place is 6th, which cannot therefore be before both Rivero and 𝗬. C is wrong. The remainder were not quickly apparent, so we grabbed our pencil. A places Quinn first. If correct, the earliest White can be is 3rd, since 𝗵𝘁 would be in the 2 slot. 𝗬 and Stanton cannot be together, and Rivero must be before 𝗬. So, Stanton, Rivero, 𝗬. That matches our rules, so A must be correct. Except that seemed too easy, so for whatever reason, we took the time to be sure, and out came the eraser. Can 𝗬 be 6th? Rule 2, Quinn must precede Rivero. Supposition 1, White precedes Rivero. That means at least 2 slots between White and 𝗬, and the only way that works is if 𝗵𝘁, White, and Quinn, or Quinn first, comprise the first 3. That leaves Stanton 7th, violating Rule 1 and eliminating B. It took a few extra seconds to be sure that A is indeed the correct response. You are on a timer. You will be forced to make judgment calls on occasion. Do I have the time to check myself? you should be reasonably sure that you can do so quickly. Question 6 supposes White immediately before Quinn, and if so, who must go sixth? This supposition creates a mandatory trio. Paired with Rule 3, vis White and Quinn must be 1 through 3 or 5 through 7. We also know per Rule 2 that Quinn precedes Rivero, so therefore our trio must fill in the first 3 slots since Rivero must be afterward. That leaves exactly one possibility. Rivero must be 6th, and B is the correct response. In our next video, we will present questions 7 through 13 of Section 3 of Prep Test 76.